you believe the Modi government should be doing, given that we're confronted with this very dangerous force in the form of the Taliban now firmly entrenched in power in Kabul?
I think these are early days, but so far I think the government has acted in the right direction basically. I think there is a vociferous opinion that we somehow have been lacking for lack of equation with Taliban, built prior to its recent conquest in Kabul. My view is that there was no scope for an equation with Taliban prior to this, nor is there any scope for equation with it post this. Anything we do will legitimize Taliban, which is not in our interest.
I totally agree with what Mr. Verma had to say before me, that we have to really watch. I think what has been happening is that we have been very careful, and we have conducted a brilliant operation in which we managed to evacuate many Indian citizens with absolute safety, and managed to handle all the all the blockades and challenges that are being faced at the Kabul airport through different routes.
At this point in time, it is a real crisis for India, and how our future looks with a neighborhood with a Taliban and a Pakistan and a China. So we need to ensure that whatever Pawan Verma ji was saying was absolutely correct, that we would need to keep our political differences aside, and as for the government also, the government's priority should be to ensure that our strategic assets that we have built over the years in Afghanistan are not impacted by the Taliban takeover. We create a narrative across the globe and make people understand about the issues with the Taliban, and having someone like them in the neighborhood, which will not just be a problem in the neighborhood but in the world in the times to come.
The return of what we have seen, brutality in Afghanistan, the fleeing of women willing to hand over their children to American guards in the embassy so that they can be taken away, that bothers me a lot. The second, what bothers me is the Pakistan-China nexus, Pakistan scoring on its western border with Afghanistan firmly in the hands of the Taliban now. That worries me a lot, because China has the deep pockets. China may have interest in natural resources. That is an area of concern as far as India's strategic interest is concerned.
The Congress has come out very strongly against this NMP. You may have heard what Amitabh Kant says. He says these are irrational. This criticism is for the sake of criticism. The Congress itself was unleashing the entire process of what he says is disinvestment at that time, now being called national monetization.
Rajdeep, it is a great closing down blunder which is announced by the Modi government, and if I will summarize the entire plan, it is the sale of public assets by using public sector banks' money to private sector, and in private sector also, who are those 2 or 3 people? No hint is required. Even a small kid in our country is aware that who is going to get the lease of these particular assets. It is a scheme to strengthen हम दो हमारे दो जो भी मिले उसे बेच दो.
BOT, build, operate, transfer, is not a new concept. The concept was introduced by earlier government, and it is very well implemented. So first you build we are talking about the brownfield project. This is the greenfield project where you build, operate, and then you transfer. Once you transfer to the government, the ownership comes back to the government. What will happen? You have to monetize it. Monetize means you have to future flow. It is nothing but the securitization of future flow. Means future flow securitization is being done on all the assets which has the potential to generate enough cash in the future.
The national infrastructure, the national monetization pipeline, across economists, experts who are neutral to the political process, would all agree that it is based and rooted on sound economics, sound public policy, and sound fiscal policy. So once you agree that this is the case, and the fact that previous governments have demonstrated great interest and energy in doing the same thing, monetizing roads under the UPA government in BOT projects, or Delhi-Mumbai airports, or Delhi electricity privatization, it is just a carry-on of a process which earlier has been project-wise and today has been presented in a programmatic format.
Today, given the economic conditions, the post-pandemic Indian economy, and what has happened over the past 5-6 years, the government of India going ahead and directly borrowing 6 lakh crore, or even over a period of 4 years, which is the target amount to raise assume that that was to be invested in infrastructure development, there is simply no way that the government can crowd out other borrowers and borrow this much. So what is really being done is, in some ways, raising funds to improve and expand on infrastructure, knowing fully well that privatization will be a political hot potato.
Given the two very divergent worldviews, one of the Taliban and the other of the resistance, what will these negotiations be all about? Is it even possible to find middle ground?
Well, I would guess so, because what Amrullah Saleh has said, I quite agree. Of course, I must confess that he's a personal friend. I've been to his home. I lived in Panjshir, and there you can sense freedom in Panjshir. I think we went with General Meston also was there. We were cycling, we went hiking in Panjshir, and that's the only place you could do while we were there. He also represents, you see, mind you, a new generation of Afghan leaders. The earlier senior leaders seem to be all war-weary. Some of them have left the country. But even Amrullah, while he is, of course, raising a banner of revolt, but Amrullah Saleh has also left the door open for negotiations. Now, how flexible Taliban is, we don't know.
In my view, Gaurav, it seems very unlikely, or rather I would put it across, it is quite difficult. The terrain over there favors the defender totally. And the beauty is, both sides of the valley, the mountains are so steep and they are rather barren. So the advantage is that you have a clear field of fire and a clear observation. And therefore, then there is a limited entry to the valley, that is the road access. Now, ahead of the road access, there are large number of hillocks, which again have outposts, and the drive is quite inwards. So they will have to meet stiff resistance throughout. And even if they have to maneuver to, scale those mountains and come down, their early warning elements of the resistant movement would be deployed.
Okay.
And it would be very difficult for them because they would be spotted from a large distance and they would be even fired upon.